I trained CrossFit for 5 years straight. You know how there's videos about how I trained CrossFit for 7 days or 30 days? Well, that's kind of easy to do. I mean, it's still tough, but I'm very proud of myself because I stuck with it for 5 years. I didn't just get a taste of the culture, or some people call it a cult, but I really got a sense for what it really was. And in this video, I want to share my unique experience and defend parts of CrossFit, because from the outside, a lot of people just assume you get injured a lot, it's a cult, you use bad form and technique, and it's just not really a true sense of CrossFit. Now, there are certain things that I will agree with. I personally do think that depending on the gym, it's not well conducted in a way, and therefore the sport leads to a higher realm of injury. I've been able to travel and train and do drop-in classes at various gyms as I've traveled over the years, so I've seen the variance of that. That I will agree with. So why did I do CrossFit for so long? How did I stick to it 4 to 5 days a week for 5 years? Well, first and foremost, I came in with an open mind, and I really was sick of the isolation that comes from a commercial gym. You know, I had an office job, and I don't really talk to that many people on a daily basis because most of my work is not that interactive. So I was getting kind of bored and isolated, especially when after work you would go to a Planet Fitness, and usually you don't talk to other people at a commercial gym. You just do that, come home. So then I tried out CrossFit. You know, I was open-minded. I didn't come in with all these prejudices that others had about it. And wow, was that experience, it really opened the door for me. I tried out a bunch of other things, martial arts classes and fitness classes, and CrossFit is what stuck because, first off, one, the social community there is really supportive. Now, yeah, a lot of people aren't really there to talk either, but that's every fitness class. Some people are just in and out. However, I did meet a couple good friends there, and then a lot of friendly acquaintances there, and they're generally more social than a commercial gym. Two, in terms of injuries, form, technique, the gym I went to actually has, they installed this a couple years in, but they literally have a banner on the wall plaster that says form above all else. So I knew I chose a good gym because they focused on technique to make sure you didn't get injured before any of that other stuff. Three, a lot of people assume that it's all about competition and the CrossFit Games, and it's really not. Most gyms I go to, it's the everyday person. A lot of people come in and out, and they're out of shape, and they may only show up once or twice a week or a month, and that's pretty normal. Not everyone's showing up 5 days a week like me. So once again, I was very proud of that. And they're just everyday people. Many of them just kind of look that way. Some of them are not these jacked, muscular people. That's probably just 1% of the gym, and only really 1%, 2% really care about anything competition wise, and at that they may only be want to do something on the local city level, not anything at the national level. Now, that being said, I really did start to get into a lot of things about CrossFit as I started to participate. I was really curious about the CrossFit Games, so I started learning up on history, watching the games, reading books about CrossFit, from books where people tried CrossFit for 30 days and embraced the suck, to actually reading Rich Froning's book. He won the CrossFit Games like 4 times in a row, and then started following the podcasts and all the YouTube channels of all the athletes, the Instagrams. There was a time where I followed all that, and it was actually quite fun. It was really interesting to see how much they wanted it and how much they treated it like a full-time job. And a lot of people are like, "Oh, kipping pull-ups are bull crap." Well, think of it this way. That's one movement out of the hundreds of movements and techniques that they do at the CrossFit Games. And they're there to win. I mean, they are like strongman bodybuilders, everything else. They spend their lives 8 hours a day training. I even visited where Tia Claire Toomey trains. She's won like the women's side individual like 5-6 times in a row. They go hard. You know, I've talked to people who have trained with Tia. He told me they skip lunch, they skip breakfast, they just train for 8 hours straight. And so they take it very seriously. It's literally like in my opinion, it's almost like a mega decathlon, because you're doing all sorts of crazy stuff, biking, swimming, some weird stuff where you're literally slamming a hammer between your legs to push this giant, heavy 100-pound block to the finish line. There's all sorts of crazy, wacky activities they do, and like more than 10 of them. So it's more fun to watch than a decathlon. And they really want to win. They spend the whole year training for this thing. So yeah, when you look at kipping pull-ups, you're like, oh, that's bad form. They're not making gains. The point is not to make gains. The point for them is to become the greatest of all time, to win that championship. And so to do that, you got to do more pull-ups within the rules than others. And guess what? Since it's 4 time and 4 repetitions, and you're allowed to use momentum, guess what? They're going to use momentum. So I think a lot of the people who see that, they fully miss the context of the entire sport and the entire thing. Plus, it's like one activity. Now you have to be a really good swimmer, cyclist, runner. I mean, they do marathon runs, sprints. It is really the most variable challenge sport there is. Now you're probably wondering, well, why did you stop doing CrossFit? If you guys have been following my journey, I assume most of you haven't. I've transitioned back to a commercial gym fitness class routine in the last couple years. And the answer to that is really because I didn't see the muscular gains in size through CrossFit that you would expect. Another big myth that people assume is, especially for women, is, oh, I don't want to look all bulky like a man from doing CrossFit. I just want to look toned. And the truth is that that doesn't happen. Gaining muscle is not that easy. And the issue is, I spent 5 years consistently doing it. I went hard at it. First year or so, I actually went like 6, sometimes 7 days a week. And it was, you know, for a variety of reasons. I lived in a place where there wasn't much else to do. It was a way of socializing. And I kind of went in there with this mentality of like, if I do more, it's better. Not always the case. You can't overtrain. But I went in there pretty hard, and first kind of like not sure what it was, to really understanding the culture, the people, realizing they're not these intimidating gym rats. They're just normal people like you and me, and you know, even the 1% that are really jacked and really trying to do this for competition, they're actually really friendly people when you get to know them. I really did care about the size, because people judge you based off size, you know. And unfortunately, a lot of people, even towards the end where I was 5 years in, especially the newbies, because there's a lot of turnover, a lot of beginners, you know, they would turn to me in class and they'd be like, hey, so you're just starting out. And I didn't really like that, because I've been doing this for a long time and it wasn't really showing in my body. I still looked like a beginner. And some people may be like, well, it doesn't matter. It's all about what you care about inside. You're stronger than you were, and you know, all that. But I think it does matter to an extent. Like, I want to see some tangible results from the work I put in. Yeah, I was, my 1 rep maxes for the major lifts were going up. However, I wanted to see the size, the muscularity, and the growth in that. And despite, you know, the coaches telling me to hang in there and saying, oh, well, you know, that person, they don't know you. Fact is, you know, when I post online, when I show myself, there's really not that much gains. People still assume I'm like full beginner, which wasn't the case. And when you look at the training modality, it's really just not geared for someone like me, who's kind of more skinny to gain size. You usually do one strength portion and then one WOD. The WOD is very cardio and metabolic focused. And yes, I was also cared about health, and yes, the health portion of that was great. It's really not geared for getting in the max volume possible. The strength portion rep range is usually from 1 to 3 reps. Sometimes you'll get to 5 reps on rare occasion. And then you may do bench press like once a month if you're lucky, but it's mostly lower body, tons of squats, deadlifts, and stuff like that. And then if it's upper body, it's usually some Olympic weightlifting thing. So sure, yeah, I did get better at cleans and deadlifts and stuff, and I did see some quad development to the point where I had to purchase different pants. But I wasn't seeing the full body development in size that I was. And of course, you may be like, well, what about that CrossFit Games athlete or that one guy at the gym? Those people, like I said, are not just doing the 1.5 hours of class every day. They're training sometimes multiple hours a day, and therefore getting a lot more volume in. And so with limited work time and efficiency, I just ended up realizing that bodybuilding was just more effective. I mean, you're doing 8 to 12 rep ranges for multiple sets versus 1 to 3 rep ranges and resting for 3 minutes. It's just not going to compute. Then you add in all the other variables and factors, like the fact that the coach has to explain and teach the workout again for sometimes 15, 20 minutes before you start, and then you have to pair up with someone, and then they're new, and then they don't know how to do it, and then they're chatting, and then you have to wait between sets, and then there's limited equipment, so you can't get, you know, the exact weight you want, and then you have to pull it off the rack and then back on. It just adds a lot of time between each that adds to the lack of time where I'm actually doing workouts like in a commercial gym. And then there's even more factors beyond that that kind of make it not optimal. When you're paired with a partner, most of the time they're more beginners, so they'll treat their first set or second set as actual sets, when in reality those are warm-up sets. They could do a lot more, they don't realize it, and they just speed through it. So they get through 3 sets, but it's really like maybe there's really one working set in there on their third one where they actually get to a weight that they actually strenuous, but they don't know it because they're new to lifting. And that happens in commercial gyms too. But you know, when you're paired with someone and they said they're done, you know, you don't always want to be rude and say, well, those were warm-up sets, and so you know that's another issue. So with all that being said, I do want to end the video by saying I've not abandoned CrossFit. I still defend parts of CrossFit. I think you do have to be careful about the injury portion, but I still do drop-in classes for CrossFit from time to time. There's a certain social aspect of it that I still love. The cardio sessions, the high-intensity interval training was amazing. My health went up, my cardio went up. You know, I did do the CrossFit Open a couple times. I posted that on my channel a few times in the past, and like it or not, it really does help your cardio a lot. And so I could sprint faster. I was completing these crazy cardio sessions where, you know, you're doing cleans, and then you're doing push-ups, and then you're running or sprinting, and then you're doing bikes. I was so proud of myself because I was completing those times so much faster than, you know, the average person who just comes into the gym. And so part of me still is proud of myself. You know, think of the cyclist or the marathoner or some, you know, long distance runner. You know, you see them on the street, you don't know that they're any good. They just look average, but they can complete some really good marathon times and so forth. And so part of me still understands that, and even though some people may judge and say, oh, look at that guy, he's a beginner, just because they see me and they don't see me with a massive muscular size and not jacked, but that's because they don't know the context of my sport. And I think within that time, just for myself, I am very proud of myself because I put in more time and I was more consistent with the sport than even other regulars at the gym. And I did develop a lot in that sport, even though it's not perceptible or judgeable by the outside. Although I do still care about that to an extent, which is why I am transitioning to a more bodybuilding step. And I think one thing I learned is as I transition back to bodybuilding, and as I've hired a coach, a live coach, a YouTuber to train me, is back in CrossFit, I probably needed more protein. I was getting about 100 grams of protein a day, probably needed about 160 grams. So that's not the full contributor to why I wasn't gaining size, but definitely one of them. And so that's it for the video. I do want to defend CrossFit and say that there are a lot of good parts to it. It is more social. It is more fun. You see regular people. You develop bonds. The fun of doing CrossFit competitions, even locally at your gym, is so cool. The health benefits for the cardio sections are great. It's just, it wasn't suited to me to gaining size. I want to debunk that myth that you can just blow up in a year or so of CrossFit. So, any women who are scared of joining, it's not that easy to gain weight. And believe me, I tried. I was gasping on the floor. I pushed myself. I was so proud of myself because in my heart, I know I pushed myself harder at a lot of those workouts, and I showed up more often than many people. And at first, yeah, it was tough, but after a while, you get used to it, and then it's just your routine. And yeah, there were times where I was exhausted and I needed to take a day or two off. But for the most part, after the first 6 months of adjusting to it, it just became my routine and I was used to it. And it does get easier, and how it's not just this cult or this way of getting injured more often. Sure, you have to be more careful. However, it's not what you seem. It's not this intimidating bro gym and you're not welcome. I found a very family friendly gym. There's a lot of grandparents and parents in there too. It's not just young people. And so I'll still do drop-ins to CrossFit from time to time. I still miss the social aspect. I miss certain movements like Olympic weightlifting and so forth. But thank you for watching. A lot more to be said about this. I actually filmed a longer duration podcast about this where I talk more in depth, which you can find on my site, link below. Subscribe.